Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we're gonna be suturing. So I have my fake skin right here and I have some tools and basically I haven't sutured in so long. It's been a minute since I've been in the OR, but I have been in the OR plenty of times to know what a medical student should or should not do in the OR. So we're going to talk about OR etiquette and we're going to talk about suturing. So by no means am I an expert on suturing. I just need to practice right now. So might as well do it on camera, share some knowledge, talk about, what goes on in an OR, because most of the time when you're a third year medical student and say you have never had any OR experience before, I know I personally went online and tried to search for someone to just talk me through what's going to happen when I go into an OR as a medical school student, because all I knew at the time was Grey's Anatomy, which is not perfectly accurate because not everyone is bleeding out and dying in an OR. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so to begin, let's talk about these tools that you might get handed as a medical school student in an OR. So the first thing you're gonna get handed for sure is you are gonna be responsible to cut all the sutures. Usually they want you to know how to cut when they are tying knots. They're gonna hand the student the scissors to make them feel like they're doing something. These are good scissors. And I'll tell you why these are good scissors to show you how to practice, because they suck. Okay? Every time when I first started out, they would give me scissors and the scissors would get caught and then I wouldn't be able to tie the knots correctly. I wouldn't be able to cut the knots correctly, or I would cut one string and the other string would be left. So sometimes they give you scissors that are not good, okay? But as a medical school student, your one responsibility in the OR is usually how to cut the sutures. Okay, so I have a suture placed down and I want to make sure that you guys know how to use scissors correctly so you don't get yelled at like how I did. And I'm sure you're saying to yourself, why would you ever get yelled at for not using scissors correctly? Well, let me tell you, there are many different techniques with using scissors, and there are different types of scissors that you can get handed in an OR. But these are just typical scissors, normal scissors. And so when you go to cut your knot, I want you don't want to ever cut the actual knot, because they just spent time suturing up skin. So to make sure you don't cut the knot, you're gonna angle your scissors, and then it's weird. You got to think about it. You want to pull in with your two fingers towards each other, so you cut fast, so you don't only cut one string and then the other string is left. It's just weird. They care so much for medical school students. Are you cutting knots correctly? So I'm gonna go in, okay? You don't cut up here, but you can put your scissors around up here, follow it down, then I angle it with the skin, so I make sure I'm not cutting the actual knot itself, and then I go ahead and cut, and now look how little, there's barely any left over, but the knot is for sure not cut. So that's how they're gonna want you to cut when you're using scissors. This is what a suture looks like, okay? And it's attached to a string. And the way that you pick it up is always with a needle driver, okay? And when you have a needle driver, the way that you hold it, so there's, bigger needle drivers and there's smaller needle drivers. And needle drivers have little serrated edges on the inside, so it grasps the needle really tightly. So the way that you put your hand in a needle driver is your thumb goes into the first hole and your fourth finger goes into the second hole. You have your middle finger rested right here in this little divot, and your pointer finger guides your needle driver. Okay, it's for balance. So don't go in there holding it like this, because this is, when I first got my suture kit, I thought this was correct, and then my needle driver was all over the place and wobbly. So we want to make sure that we're holding it correctly, okay? And it can lock, and then you unlock it. Lock, unlock it. And to unlock it, you can't just pull. You have to kind of press and then pull apart. So it's going to take a little bit of time to learn how to unlock a needle driver. So definitely get a practice kit and practice that on your own. But so the way that we pick up a needle is with a needle driver, and you are always going to pick up our suture. I'll just show you real quick. Okay, take this out of the way. Okay, so the suture itself is kind of like a hook. Okay, so when we put our needle driver onto this hook, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to turn the hook around. Once again, you're never going to be touching this with your hand most of the time. We want to grab the suture not at half. So if you split it into like halves, you're not going to directly hold it in half. You're actually going to hold it a little bit further back, okay, than halfway, okay? And that's where you want to grab your suture, a little bit further back than halfway, okay? And a lot of people try to give advice for suturing, and what they'll do when it comes to knot tying is they'll tell you about this wraparound technique. You just wrap it around twice, grab the end of your suture and pull through, and then you'll wrap it around the other way, grab the suture and pull through. And yes, this does technically tie your knot, and you will see attendings do this, okay? And if your attending tells you to tie a knot this way, totally fine to tie a knot that way by just like doing the loop-de-loop and pulling it, and you tie your suture. But if your attending does not tell you specifically to tie your knot like that, you should not be tying your knots like that, because as a medical school student, you are not at the level of attending. You've not been doing this for, 30 years. They want to make sure you know how to tie square knots. So if you get to a point where you got to suture and they tell you, okay, tie your knot off, you need to then be doing your single hand knots. Okay, great. So next, let's talk about suturing. So you have your needle driver when they're like, okay, it's your turn to suture. And so most of the time, medical school students are responsible for suturing up portholes. So you just did a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, lap appy, something laparoscopic, anything, a colectomy, and they're going to ask you to suture up the portholes, okay? And most portholes, unless you're around unless it's like a little bit bigger, like a 10 millimeter near the umbilical region, are only going to take 1, maybe 2 sutures, and they're going to be interrupted. So if you're a medical school student and you're about to start third year, you probably have already learned some of the terms, like what's an interrupted suture and everything like that. There's tons and tons on YouTube that you can go find to like exactly know how to suture. But here I'm just telling you a little bit of tips on how to succeed in the OR to like make sure you kind of know what you're doing, because I didn't. Okay, so when they say, close a porthole with like 1 stitch, okay, they're not asking you to do a simple suture, okay? No one uses simple sutures. And like maybe in the ER, they'll use a simple suture for like some stitches, but like in the OR, like they're not, I've never been in an OR where an attending has asked me to do simple sutures. And a simple suture kind of looks like this. So, it's like you can really see the suture like go across the skin, and it's just not how you close a porthole. And how you close a porthole most of the time is that they want a simple subcuticular suture. Okay, so go on YouTube, learn what a subcuticular suture is. It is like the best way to close skin without like to bring the edges perfectly together. It doesn't leave as much of a scar. You don't have like the dots like how normal stitches do. Like I had to get stitches on my ankle when I was like a kid, and I still see the dots next to the line. Okay, so the subcuticular sutures don't do that. So most attendings that I have worked with use subcuticular sutures. So in order to do a subcuticular suture, we need forceps or pickups and a needle driver. So let's use some forceps. Okay, so talking about forceps real quick. Forceps can either have these little tips on the end. These are called rat tooth forceps, and or they could be, you know, completely flush that look more like tweezers that you pluck your eyebrows with. So never call these tweezers, okay? And they usually are called pickups in the OR, like pickups. Okay, someone hands you the pickups. All right, we don't hold pickups like this. Okay, we hold pickups like a nice pencil. And when we're suturing, we have also good posture. So once again, this is not like a suturing video on how to learn this specific technique. These are just little tips that they kind of pick on medical students for. Okay, so they say close the porthole. We're gonna use a subcuticular suture in order to close the porthole. And so we always lift the skin with the forceps. We pull through, okay? You guys can look up how to do a subcuticular suture. So this is top to bottom, okay? Pull through, and now we're gonna go bottom to top, okay? And it's all in the wrist when it comes to suturing, right? So this is gonna take some practice over some time. It's honestly, I find suturing way harder when I'm practicing on these types of materials. Like real skin is like the best. Like if you can go to a butcher and get like pig's feet or something like that. I know people who are like who really want to practice, they'll do something like that. I never did, but I wish I did. That would be fun. Okay, so I just did one subcuticular suture. Okay, great. So now we want to talk about tying off our knot. So at this point, when you need to tie off your knot, okay, so we're gonna tie it off. Okay, let me get my two ends. All right, so you can learn you know, whatever's easiest for you to know how to tie. Okay, what's important as a medical student, not only to know how to tie, is to bury the knot, especially with these portholes. And what that means is that when you are pulling your first knot down, you're going to push with your finger to really get that knot in the crevice of the skin, okay? So we're pulling the skin together and then we're pushing the knot down so you can't see it, okay? So now let's do our knot the other way with a one-handed single tie. Okay, haven't done this in a minute, okay? Pushing the knot down, other way. And we want to practice with these little strings because it's definitely a lot harder to tie with these little strings versus using like a rope or a practice knot tying rope. So I would suggest practicing with these little strings because it's a whole lot different scenario, okay? All right, so we did our certain amount of knots that's required, okay? We're definitely gonna push down with our finger. We wanna bury the knot. You take both strings together, okay? You ask for scissors politely. You get some scissors, where's my scissors? And we're gonna practice our cutting, and our cutting, we go in between, we put our suture in between the scissors, then we go down to the skin, but we angle it up. Okay, we cut, and there. Okay, so definitely go look up how to do subcuticular sutures. Okay, it will definitely help for your surgery rotation. Okay, all I can say is say to yourself top to bottom, bottom to top, have good posture, practice, practice, practice. Okay, all right, so we're here again. We're ready to tie our knot. Now, there's a couple techniques that different surgeons have told me about knot tying and like what to do with this piece because this has blood on it. You don't want to stab yourself or the person next to you. So I have had an attending tell me go like this with it. Okay, so like even if it touches you, it won't hurt. Or most people will say, okay, take your forceps and then block your needle, okay? So we're gonna block our needle. And you don't wanna clamp, I never understood this, but you don't wanna clamp on the actual needle itself, like the sharp point, because we don't wanna blunt it. Okay, so clamping your needle looks like this. I clamp the bottom and the needle is facing inward, okay? Good. So now that we can put that down, and then I can go ahead and tie my knots. So there's a couple more things I want to go over besides like the technique. This is about like technique. These are just like little tips that I've personally gotten yelled at before. Never palm your needle driver, and palming means to not put your fingers in the holes and then just going like this. Okay, yes, attendings do this because it allows them to really get a better 360 to get that needle in to the whatever tissue they're going for. But it's just, you cannot do that as a medical school student unless the attending tells you specifically to do it. Because if you do it without them telling you, they'll just be like, what, you don't know how to, use a needle driver? Like, you haven't learned that yet? Let's step back and learn it. You don't want to get put in that position. Other tips for going into the OR is grab your gloves before you go into the OR. I always have a set of gloves in my back pocket. I don't ever expect the scrub tech to grab my gloves for me. They'll grab the attendings, and sometimes they'll grab the residents, but I definitely would never assume that they were going to grab it for me. Make sure you have eye coverings, because there was a time where I forgot about our eye coverings. I was all sterile, and one of the nurses he was so nice to me. He's like, Jessica, I'm gonna grab you a visor. He had to put a visor on me because I was already sterile, but I didn't have any eye protection. So make sure you're grabbing your eye protection before you scrub. Make sure you grab your gloves and ask before you put them on the sterile field. Before you rip them open and put them on a sterile field, always ask, because the scrub techs have been there a lot longer than you have, and they kind of know the lay of the land, and they kind of run the show until, and help the attending along the way. When it comes to instruments on the instrument tray, never just grab off the instrument tray. It's just kind of disrespectful, I would say, unless you were in a very as a medical school student, you have to be really just cognizant of what you're doing, because we don't want to ever come off as disrespectful. And so I would just say, ask like, oh, can I grab those forceps real quick? Okay, yeah, sure. There was a time it was like bleeding really bad, and like I kind of like pointed, I like stopped myself, and she's like, go, and she like gave me the okay, like I could grab off her tray, and that was like the only time ever I grabbed off of a tray. So they are so good at their job, and they have those instruments ready for you. You will not need to grab instruments off someone's tray. So they'll hand it to you, or what they'll do is they'll hand it and they'll put it on the blue, that's the blue cover that's covering the patient, and they'll like put it off their tray onto the patient, and then that's free to grab. Other things I would say is that it is always good to show initiative in the OR, and the ways that a medical school student can show initiative is if that scrub tech put an instrument down for retracting, and the attending's like going for some tissue and like trying to suture or do something, it's totally like, it's encouraged to take that retractor and like kind of start retracting for the attending. Like, you don't have to be told, hey, suction this hot air that's coming off of the bovie. So like grabbing the suction and retracting are like great ways to show initiative as a medical school student. Okay, we're not gonna grab like forceps or a needle driver when we're not getting handed it to us, specifically from the attending, but like suction and retraction are two things from medical school student that are showing initiative. And it's like, because you can't really mess up retracting, but overall, like when you're in an OR, have fun. I think it's really fun. Even if an attending yells at you, it's okay. Like, it's okay to be yelled at, because if it was my family member on the table, like I would want the attending to yell at the stupid medical student if they weren't doing something right. So you got to view it as that. It's like all about the patient, and we want everything to go really smoothly. So if you get yelled at, it's okay. It's like, it's learning. And the OR is just, well, for me, it's just something super fun. I personally wear compression socks every single day. And whether I'm in the OR or not at the hospital, I personally wear compression socks every single day. One, because I notice I have so much more energy if I wear them at the end of the day versus there was one day I forgot to wear them. I was dead. It like helps push your blood up to your brain. It helps me like my back doesn't hurt as much when I'm standing in long cases. So compression socks are great. I tried Crocs. I don't like Crocs. I either wear like really, really comfy gym shoes or I have Calzeros. Calzeros are like my clogs that I like to wear. I got them in bright yellow. They have so many fun colors. So those are the shoes that I usually wear in the OR. The Calzeros are nice because they are rubber, so you can like hose them down if they get disgusting. But you can always wear shoe covers. If you're a third-year student and you're nervous about going to the OR, it's gonna be okay. Like there's gonna be times when you get yelled at, and there's gonna be times when the surgeon is playing music and laughing and having fun. So just remember to have fun. You know, take in each attending is gonna have a different lesson, different way of doing things. So the best you can, do the best you can, and everything should be okay. Okay. So make sure, I would say if I was a third-year medical student or a fourth year going into my surgery sub-Is, I would look up knot tying. I would practice that using actual suture material. I would practice subcuticular sutures, and I would practice running subcuticular sutures. Okay? So those are things I would do, and I hope this helped a little bit, just talking about like some of the little techniques. And I will see you guys in my next video.